Hey guys, I couldn't be more thrilled to have back on the line for a year-end wrap, BIX WEIR from roadtoroota.com. BIX has some of the most crazy theories out there, some people say, but guess what? They're starting to come true, and that's good news because his theories revolve around the fact that the good guys are going to take the power back from the bad guys. Welcome back, BIX.
Hey, thanks, Sean. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here, and I wanted to get you on the line and do a 2011 wrap because we've seen such tremendous volatility in both the silver and the gold prices. We had a low, I think, for the year of 2011, unless it goes lower from where we're talking today, Bix, but a low of 26.82 and a high of 48.55. And for those that were buying throughout that price range, we got a lot of sad faces, a lot of people like me who were buying in the 40s. And even at 48, I wasn't selling. I was buying more physical every 2 weeks, and now we're back down at these bargain basement prices. I want to talk about a number of different things, but first, welcome back, and where would you like to begin?
Well, I want everybody to kind of think about and look at where the silver price went this year. And, you know, if you pull up a one-year graph of the price volatility and things like that, you see this image of the price of silver going from early January up to $50 in May, and then getting the slam down, and you kind of see it going up and then getting slammed down. And and the funny thing is, this was all orchestrated. It was set in place in early January by Bill Daley when he joined on with Obama at the as his advisor and as his chief of staff. And he and the guys at J.P. Morgan, along with Treasury, set this price volatility for the entire year starting in January. And they do that with their computers. They rig it every day. It's been rigged since the early 70s. So when you look at that, don't you just wish you had this graph in early January so you could play those ups and downs like the riggers do on a daily basis. And you're going to see coming near the end of the year, which we're seeing right now, that all these games they played, they're going to reset the price back to the low of where they started in January, somewhere around $27. And then next year, they're hoping we start the same thing. They'll set their little computers on how they want the price to go, and then they'll play their games throughout the year. So, it's aggravating, it's frustrating, but once you understand that there's no free market in silver, and there are people behind the scenes with computers that rig the price from months or even, in this case, a year beforehand, you feel a little more comfortable about where the price is right now, and you continue the fight, continue to write letters, continue to jump and yell and scream about the market rigging. So it's kind of a hard way to look at it, but don't you wish that starting in January you had the graphs that J.P. Morgan and the market riggers have for next year?
I mean, we can all imagine the amount of money we would have made if we would have gone short, at 48. But we were talking to many people along the way, like Bob Chapman and others, who predicted that 50 would offer little resistance, and beyond that, we'd see 100 at the end of the year, Brother John F. and others. And I don't disparage any of those good commentators on the $100 call, because as we all know, this is such a manipulated market that if we could have broken the back of J.P. Morgan, this thing could have easily gone to 150. It eventually will, and I think that you're on board with that, Bix. You've said that this thing could go easily into $1,000 an ounce or more. Now let me ask you this: the massive silver slam we've seen in November and December, it's my view that they want to paint the tape, and the last thing they want is for silver to finish this year again with a 20 or 30% gain, because it would only draw more interest. What's your take on where we're at now? I think it's an absolute bargain. I'm continuing to buy, as I've done in the 30s and 40s. I will do in the 20s. Where do you see 2012 going?
Well, 2012, I think, is going to be the big year, the year that we break away from the computer-manipulated system. It's been in place since the early 70s, so it is a gigantic deal. When they shut these computer rigging programs off, either by choice or by force, the prices of gold, silver, and everything the volatility will be off the charts. Whether or not the COMEX is around by the end of next year is I don't think it will be, because of all the fraud and manipulation going on now, and you can see it with MF Global. So I do think that 2012 will signal the end of gold and silver manipulation. What it's going to do to the price you see on TV versus the price you can buy and sell silver and gold for at your local coin shop. It's one of those who knows things. Right now, all prices are taken from the COMEX and the LME and what they say on TV, which is the rigged paper price. And unfortunately, for small investors, the rigged paper price is the same price as the physical because, still to this day, most people don't understand that gold and silver are rigged prices. These are not the real prices for gold and silver. And one day we will get a free market for silver, and I believe it's in 2012.
Well, Bix, you wrote a piece the other day in which you had called out the interview that I did with Ranting Andy Hoffman, and it's really amazing to see how in agreement you guys are. And your road to Ruta theory is really starting to play out in a way that so many folks didn't expect. A lot of people thought that you were wrong. It was poppycock. I still don't believe that Alan Greenspan's a good guy, but I do respect your view on that. I think it's because your theories are complex. You, for a long time, had been considered to be really, I think, on the fringe. Your theories were really out there, and a lot of people would reject them out of hand after our first interview or two, and I would say, read it. Have you read it? Have you read Road to Ruta Theory? Because if you've not read it, you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, because this stuff is tangible. You're not just grasping at straws when you talk about the Wishes and Rainbows comic books, are you? This is real stuff.
This it is, and truthfully, I thought I was crazy when I first discovered it all. But the more you dig into it, and the more you understand it, the more it makes sense. People are really coming around on the total implosion ever since MF Global came out with what's going on there. This is a brokerage house where they held metal and they held money for other people's accounts, and it was gone in a blink of an eye. And the way it's being handled, people are starting to say, "Oh my God, this is what's happening. This is how it can happen." And people around the world are pulling their money out of the system, which, as we well know, in a fractional reserve system, that doesn't fly well because within, you lose 5% of your Tier 1 capital, you're bankrupt.
You said in regards to that interview with Ranting Andy, you said two things that you would challenge is, number one, you believe that Ron Paul will be our next president, and he is being positioned by the good guys in order to assist in the transition after the global monetary crash.
Yes, and maybe 6 months ago, people thought there was not a chance in the world that Ron would get as far as he has today already.
Right.
And you can see the news media already saying, well, the Iowa caucus doesn't mean anything because Ron Paul might win it. It's completely ridiculous, and it gives some transparency to how controlled this political machine is.
It sure does. It's absolutely pathetically transparent how frightened they are of him, at least how frightened the bad guys are of him.
I think it's how frightened many people are. The entrenched Republicans and Democrats who kind of run that machine, not all of them really understand that they're being controlled by other powers. So, they see Ron Paul as a threat. They're going to do everything they can to try to destroy his campaign, which is extremely difficult. I mean, they're having to go back 20 years to find these things written in his newsletter that are just ridiculous. Ron Paul is the most powerful candidate when it comes to individual freedoms, and to call him a racist or say that his newsletters had racist remarks in it, so he's a racist, it's completely ridiculous. They're having to search and scratch for something because he's such an amazing man, and his views on the future of our country are what we need right now. But I think when he gets after Iowa, I think he'll do well in New Hampshire. At some point, I see Sarah Palin coming on and endorsing him. And I know a lot of people aren't happy when I say that, but from when I analyze what she's done to get middle America behind her, and then everything she says on TV about who she might endorse basically discounts every other candidate and goes right to what Ron Paul's saying. The only difference they have is on foreign policy, and people don't really understand Ron Paul's foreign policy. He's not an isolationist. He wants to trade with everybody, but he's not going to support the military-industrial complex. He's not going to be the policeman of the world. He's going to be a strong military leader, but not one who goes out and stirs up trouble like we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Yeah, that's right. And I think a couple of points here. Nobody ever will put the military-industrial complex budget on the table when we talk about cutting the budget. And it needs to be talked about because this country is spending more than all other countries combined on its military on an annual basis. And it's sad to see that happen because it takes away from all of the important other things that a society needs to run BIX. And I don't want to lecture anybody because you guys all know this, but Ron Paul will put that on the table, whereas all the bought and paid for entities will not even discuss the military budget, which only gets an increase every year, and I think now is over probably $1 trillion a year with all things considered. And I think your Sarah Palin point is a brilliant one because we all have to realize that Sarah Palin does carry a lot of weight with a lot of the brainwashed folks that consider themselves Republicans, and if she were to endorse Ron Paul, I think that would go a long way in validating him in the minds of those that really aren't paying very close attention and don't really understand who he is and what he stands for. You did mention that Sarah Palin may endorse him. Who do you see Ron Paul picking as his running mate? Any ideas on that?
Well, it gets back to the Sarah Palin issue. Now, Sarah Palin is kind of everything. If you look at Ron Paul on he's an older guy. His knowledge is unbelievable, but he doesn't have that appeal to the youth and the vitality and the middle America and those people in America who aren't as cerebral, shall we say. And Sarah Palin, she connects with those people. And the vice president, what the vice president is supposed to do in America is take over if the president is killed or dies or whatever. But when you look at the past vice presidents, what they did, they kind of picked a cause. And I think the Sarah Palin's cause will be the healing of America after this banking crash that is looming. And right now I'm pinpointing it towards the March time frame. But she would be perfect to kind of heal the middle America, and she has the strength and vitality to go out there and do a lot of the stuff, a lot of the legwork that Ron Paul, might be too tired or too old to do. Ron comes with his strengths and weaknesses now that he's been fighting this fight for so long and they've beaten him up for so long, but his message is correct. And if you have Sarah Palin out there, fighting the cause of, kind of getting America back on their feet, I think that would be a good match. Now, I know everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people out there got turned away from Sarah Palin. They think she's not smart enough and all that stuff that, a lot of it comes from some interviews she did about seeing Russia from her backyard and things like that. The media loves to spin this stuff, but when you look at what Sarah Palin says and you think about it and you connect Ron Paul with Sarah Palin, there's a lot of kind of a symbiotic relationship things going on there that they might make a very good team. There are other people, Judge Napolitano comes to mind because he is a popular guy, but he might be too much like Ron Paul. So, there are many options out there, but what we have to do is get the rest of the people who don't understand Ron Paul, we got to get them on board, and I think Sarah Palin would be a perfect person for that.
I got it. Okay, so that will make libertarians crazy to hear her name mentioned, in the same breath as him. But I get you. I got you. That's it'd be a strategic decision, and it does tend to make some sense. Let's bridge over to the CFTC. One of the things that came up in my interview with Ranting Andy, which just really blew me away, and I think it's in alignment with your thinking, is when Andy was asked, when will the CFTC finally get off their butts and define what a swap is? And he responded, and I quote, "The CFTC is the government. The government is the entity that is suppressing gold and silver." J.P. Morgan just got a waiver from the CFTC that they have until at least May 2012 to do any reporting at all in regards to position limits. So Ranting Andy is saying that the CFTC is never going to define what a swap is, and this manipulation will just go on in perpetuity. What's your thought on that?
I do think that J.P. Morgan has come below the required limits on position limits if it was implemented today, and I think Bart Chilton has said something to that effect. But the position limits rule is they don't want it to take out the manipulation, right off the bat. They don't want it to be the cause, because then the bankers will jump up and down and say, "See what you did. These regulations are bad because you destroyed the entire market." Because if you can't control gold and silver, you can't control any of the markets, because all of a sudden the U.S. dollar will be worthless and there will be collapses from the big banks and things like that. You can't take out J.P. Morgan with a regulation because J.P. Morgan going down would take out everybody else with $90 trillion in derivatives or whatever it is today. But what the CFTC is doing and it is positioned to do is put these position limits in place to stop the manipulation going forward, or at least to slow it down. So, what I'm hearing from the CFTC now is that they're going to define position limits in January, and it's a 60-day window before it's implemented. So it fits right in with my mid-March type of crash for the system, and then going forward, where do they go from there? I think the CFTC, all these rules they're trying to put in place have more to do with how to go forward after the crash, not necessarily to handcuff the banks before the crash, because the banks got to go. We have to have liquidation of all this malinvestment and all this crazy debt and debt derivative instruments. It has to go away or we'll never get out of this mess.
Hey guys, thanks for watching Part 1. Happy New Year. And don't miss Part 2, the gigantic Ponzi scheme and the road to Ruta.